We are counting down the days until the primary election day. Georgians are headed to the polls Tuesday on a number of high-profile races, including the race for governor. Right now, we're joined virtually by Democratic candidate Geoff Duncan. Thanks so much for joining us today. I first want to get started with, can you kind of tell us why you decided to run for governor?
Well, I think, like many folks, that Georgia's best days are still in front of us. But to get to those best days for all 11 million Georgians, we've got to make some changes. And certainly, I've got an interesting story. I used to be the Republican lieutenant governor and now a proud Democrat. But I wake up with a better toolkit now to serve those needs of those 11 million Georgians and do things like expand Medicaid, pass common sense gun legislation, repeal the heartbeat bill. None of those would have been possible in my former party.
And what are some of those top issues that you want to tackle if you're elected come November?
Well, I've stayed focused throughout the campaign on the three biggest issues that I think most Georgians wake up worried about: the affordability crisis, the healthcare crisis, and the Donald Trump crisis. And all three of those are real, even for Republicans. I think a majority of Georgians wake up worried about it. But if a Democrat can win this governor's race for the first time in nearly 30 years, we can start to take some really big steps in the right direction on things like public education, transit, common sense gun legislation, healthcare, infant and maternal mortality rates. Those are the big issues, but we got to win. A second place trophy isn't going to allow us to solve any of those problems. And I think that's what's really on the minds and hearts of Democrats across Georgia, is they're ready to win. And I certainly want to lead that charge.
We hear concerns about affordability all the time from people. It seems like that's just the biggest thing on folks' mind these days. What are some ways that you could help ease the cost of living?
Well, I've talked about every stop is creating a $1.7 billion jumpstart fund by taking 10% of the state's rainy day fund. And that $1.7 billion we're going to wrap around the axle of poverty by better funding the CAPS program, which directly lowers child care costs so single parents can finally go back to work. We're going to better fund the TANF program so that we can have folks that need temporary assistance with their power bills or with their transportation to and from work. We're also going to use some of that money to scale up affordable housing programs. All over the state, individual cities and counties have great programs that we don't need to reinvent the wheel as a state. We just need to give them more resources. Those are the first steps in the right direction. But look, at the end of the day, when you have a sitting president that is determined to destroy this country from the inside out, it's hard to push back, but we will do everything we can here in this great state of Georgia.
You were lieutenant governor last time around when the state redistricted following the 2020 census. What's your reaction to the call from Governor Kemp for a special session to redraw those voting maps?
I think it's a step in the wrong direction. The home of the civil rights movement, we should be the pinnacle of success for the Voting Rights Act and how we group ourselves and reapportion ourselves. It's troubling to watch almost every Republican statewide candidate run to a microphone within minutes of that Supreme Court ruling that dismantled the Voting Rights Act and really talk about racially gerrymandering districts. I mean, that should not be what we're all about here in Georgia. It is concerning. As governor, I would veto any gerrymandered legislative bill that came before me. And I would do it because it's the right thing to do, not because it creates a political headwind or tailwind. We've got to make sure that we protect democracy, even if it doesn't politically help us.
Data centers are a really big concern for our viewers. These developers are promising jobs and needed tax revenue to local communities, but many folks out here really don't want these things near their homes. How should the state go about regulating them?
Yeah, we certainly have got to reshape this conversation because everywhere I go, there's communities very concerned about the data center population growth. And it's for a number of reasons. One is because some communities just don't want it in their community for various sets of reasons. Some are concerned about the water usage, and some are worried about the power and rate ramifications. All of those need to be addressed. And I think at the end of the day, we could become an innovation hub here by requiring these data centers to use closed loop water systems so they're not soaking up 15 million gallons. Guaranteeing that ratepayers aren't having to shoulder the burdens of some of this grid development and transmission upgrades and generation upgrades. There's a better way to be doing this, but just running with the spigot wide open is certainly not the right way.
Now, you're running as a Democrat for your campaign for governor, but you most recently served as a Republican lieutenant governor and presided over legislation like Georgia's restrictive abortion ban. How can you convince Democrats that they can trust you?
I think just by being open and honest in every room I walk into, open and honest that on some of these issues I didn't have enough political courage to do the right thing, like guns. Some of it I didn't have enough information, like Medicaid expansion. And some of it I didn't have the moral clarity necessary to do the right thing, and that certainly includes the heartbeat bill. Day one as governor, I will sign an executive order that clarifies doctors can practice medicine without fear of prosecution. And also, we'll introduce the legislation to repeal the 6-week ban and do what millions of women want us to do. Look, after hearing these unbelievably complicated medical stories and personal situations, it's become abundantly obvious that women absolutely deserve the right to choose.
The Democratic primary is quite crowded and potentially almost likely headed to a runoff. What do you think sets you apart from the rest of the field?
Well, I think two things. One is the winnability argument against Republicans in the general. I think we are building this coalition big enough with Democrats, independents, and yes, even disgusted Republicans to show up and vote for us, not just in the primary, but also in the general election. But I think more importantly is day one, I'm ready for the job. I've been behind the curtain. I understand how the state budgeting process works. I understand how to serve as the chief negotiator. I also understand how these state agencies work and what needs to be improved. So I show up day one without having to read a user's guide as to how to be governor in a great state like Georgia.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us.